Hey everybody, Brian Zane here with my very belated review of AEW Double or Nothing. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering why this came out so late. I know a lot of people have been messaging me and commenting, when's the review going to come out? As I explained over the weekend, I lost my voice and I wasn't able to record much of anything, much less my thoughts on the pay-per-view this past Sunday. So I had to take a little bit of time for my voice to recover as best I can. You might be able to hear it. It's still not 100%, but I got it as strong as I could so I could give you my thoughts about this show. So thank you for your patience and your understanding. I hope my takes are still as viable and as valid now as they might have been 3 or 4 days ago. But there you go. Anyway, it's the first year the show takes place in Glendale, breaking the tradition of taking place in Las Vegas. I do miss that familiar Vegas aesthetic, the theme they had for the show every year, the that was awesome, so RIP that. I'll never forget, being in the crowd 6 years ago to the day for the first Double or Nothing at the MGM Grand. What a time to be alive for that, and it's crazy to see how much wrestling has changed just in the last 6 years since that first show. Your opening match is the Owen Hart Women's Tournament Final as Mercedes Mone takes on Jamie Hayter. I've really been enjoying the build for this matchup, especially how they've been teasing that, Jamie's really trying to get the Haterade, trying to connect with Mercedes on that, but she's always been able to find a way to escape it in the last several weeks. So will she hit it, and how devastating could it be if she does? I do like the build for that. We had dueling chants for both ladies throughout the match here. So definitely a split crowd, I would say, for Jamie and Mercedes. I like this counter out of the half crab where Hayter falls into the ropes, then takes a couple of wicked-looking meteoras, or is it meteore, through the ropes and onto the floor. Mercedes working the back for a while. I love that backstabber into the straitjacket submission. I loved giving my creator wrestlers that specific straitjacket hold in No Mercy. Anyone remember that? You had to save up and buy it on the SmackDown Mall. I love this big back and forth sequence. It ends with the big lariat by Hayter. Both women are down and out. Hayter on the outside running up the steps. She actually slips but is able to recover. Good on her for that. The O'Connor roll by Mone is countered into this nice rear naked choke. They're rolling into the statement maker. Hayter manages to fight out of it. She hits the lariat again. We get a close kick out. Tombstone by Jamie, another kick out. Mercedes catching the lariat attempt again, then plants her with a sick looking DDT to win the tournament final. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. It's kind of a bold ranking, but I think that the Owen Hart matches that bookend this pay-per-view are some of the strongest on the whole show, on a show that I think is really stacked with very good to great matches throughout, for the most part. And I think it was a really strong tournament overall and a very good finals. And I loved how the crowd was into it, a lot of great false finishes throughout, and I think it was just a very, very excellent showing for both ladies, and they definitely showed out. Daniel Garcia teams up with a returning Nigel McGuinness, and they're fighting for Toni Schiavone's honor against FTR, who of course are in the midst of their heel run, and now they are managed by Stokely Hathaway. And by the way, I just wanted to point out, Stokely, Andre Chase, both rocking sweatsuits as of late. I see what y'all are doing, and I just want to say, I'm flattered. Cash is razzing Garcia a little bit early in the match because of their relationship. The crowd pops huge for Nigel when he's first tagged in. They're trading strikes. We get welts on Nigel's chest almost immediately. I love this moment where he's on the outside. He's thrown into the ring but just turns around and fights right back. Cash at one point hits the Tower of London onto Nigel off the apron. Nigel, a couple minutes later, he rebounds off the ropes and lays Cash out with the clothesline. We get that hot tag to Garcia, and it's an FTR match, so we're going to get those submissions in stereo. Stokely wants to get involved, but Daddy Magic cuts him off. FTR hits a shatter machine onto Nigel on the floor, and I'm like, wow, that looks like it hurts Cash more than anyone else in that combination of people. And of course, the story being Toni, he gets up to check on Nigel, and he gets harassed by FTR. There's an extra heat going on there. Garcia's all by himself. He puts up this fight, but he falls victim to the stuffed pile driver. Somehow he gets a foot on the bottom rope. Daddy Magic gets involved again. Cash dives onto him as Dax has Garcia in the submission. Nigel's kicked down again as the hold continues. Garcia passes out and FTR wins. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. There was a lot going on in this matchup here with the outside forces. I enjoyed a lot of what was going on here. I liked what Nigel did. I thought he looked good in his return. I like how AEW has been using McGuinness in the last year or so. Just having him come back very sparingly for in-ring competition, I think that's been working pretty well. But yeah, this matchup mostly done just to help further build the heel cred of FTR as they're still kind of early in this run. Stretcher match next as Ricochet takes on Mark Briscoe. I'm always happy to see Mark getting some pay-per-view time. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, just how much I've been enjoying the progression of Ricochet's heel character. He's not exactly the same athlete he was 10 years ago. And I think that him changing his style ever so slightly to reflect that and also embracing this very annoying, very antagonistic heel character has done wonders, for his run in AEW, especially considering how much people wrote him off at the beginning. I think he's really found himself in this new character, and this is a match that I think really plays to he and Mark's strengths. We get some fun stretcher-based offense early on. Rico goes for the shooting star off the apron, but just eats the stretcher the long way. Mark with a Sabu-like chair throw to the face of Chet. There's tables getting pulled out, there's chairs, then there's a bucket with some cleaning product, and Mark shines Ricochet's head up, then just whacks him with the bucket. That was absolutely hilarious. I just love the fact that at this point they keep finding funny ways to exploit the whole bald thing with Ricochet. It's got some legs still. Ricochet blinds Mark with some of that cleaner, and Briscoe is now bleeding. His DNA is splatting all over the stretcher. Ricochet wheels Briscoe into the ambulance. He goes to close the door, but Mark using a crutch to block it, and he fights back. What a visual of this bloody, insane Mark Briscoe spraying a fire extinguisher in the back of an ambulance. Back in the ring, the J Driller to Ricochet follows up with a big-ass froggy bow off the top and through the table on the floor. Rico then crawls under the apron to grab the golden scissors, and he stabs Mark with it. Mark fights to get him out of Ricochet's hands, but then Ricochet is like, haha, backup scissors. Dick kick City for good measure. The spirit gun, he throws Mark into the ambulance and closes the doors to win. This one gets 4 stars out of 5 for me. This was a really fun match. We saw some visceral moments with the blood. We saw some funny moments. I think if you can find that balance of, finding the lighthearted or the humorous moments in this matchup where there is a lot of violence built into it, I think that that's a great combination. I think that Mark Briscoe can have a great match with just about anybody. And again, this is a great kind of chapter in Ricochet's current arc, just showing more of his vicious side. He's not just that high spot guy. He's not just an annoying character. He's got some viciousness to him. For the AEW tag titles, the Hurt Syndicate defend against the Sons of Texas. Boy, this pay-per-view, it's got a lot of people on this show who you normally wouldn't see on pay-per-views as of late. So I'm liking a little bit of the variety we're getting in terms of the roster on this. It's nice to see Dustin Rhodes back on a pay-per-view in which I don't think he's going to be squashed going into this one. I just have flashbacks to his match with Swerve World's End a couple of years ago. MJF is the newest member of the Hurt Syndicate after weeks spent trying to, get his way in the group through all manner of flattery and bribes and whatnot, and actions, of course, at ringside. Finally getting inducted in the group and being accepted, and now the big question is, what's going to happen? Where is this going to lead? When will MJF inevitably turn, and where's it going to lead? We've seen what happens when MJF has groups. Who could forget the Pinnacle, for instance, and his time with the Inner Circle, and how that materialized. So MJF in a group is always an interesting choice, and so we'll see where it goes. But so far it has been entertaining. Dustin showing his toughness early on against Bob and Shelt. Sammy comes into the ring, gets thrown around. MJF with a cheap shot on the outside. I love the way Lashley hits Guevara with this huge dominator after flipping him over on his shoulder. Great line, great exchange here on commentary between, Taz and MVP. And I forget what the setup was, but Taz talks about how his memory's gone because chair shots affected him, and MVP goes, "Oh, cannabis is mine. I totally get it." Sammy with the cutter gets the hot tag to Dustin, who hits the code red onto Shelton. MJF on the apron ends up costing his own man as Dustin splits the uprights with Dick Kick City to Shelton. Sammy with the shooting star press to Bob. Dustin with the crossroads to Shelton, and we get a kick out. MJF offering his big shiny diamond ring to Shelton right in front of the referee. At this point, Lashley is getting very frustrated with MJF's antics. It feels like for a minute there's just like a lot of chaos and a bit of confusion as to what we should be focusing on, because there's action in the ring, there's action on the outside, and there's just kind of like these big pauses and holds because we've got MJF wanting to use a loaded punch. Bobby seems to want to stop him. Then they share a smile. Bob spears Dustin through the barricade. Then they celebrate, and then Shelton wipes out Sammy with a couple of super kicks to win the match, and the Hurt Syndicate retain the gold. I think that was generally solid work, but the last few minutes I thought were a bit confusing, the way that Lashley and MJF acted out that whole scene. I think if it weren't for the cameras, it would have been even more confusing. So I'm glad at least they were able to kind of like show us what we needed to be looking at. But I think that some of the pauses and some of the beats just made it feel a little awkward. For the Continental Championship, Kazuchika Okada, who has darkened his hair, defends against Speedball Mike Bailey. Early in the match, Speedball goes to kick Okada, who's sitting up against the steps. So he moves, so Speedball kicks the step. He's selling his foot, and then he hops it into what Taz calls the crane gimmick, and crane kicks Okada into the triangle moonsault after that. And boy, this match is just two guys whose strikes look really good, and it looks like they hurt, like for both of them, because they're just laying into each other as this match goes on. It is very entertaining in that way. Okada goes after the knee and the head frequently in this matchup. We get a DDT on the floor, another in the ring. I love that running dropkick that sends Bailey out of the ring. He counters another slide with a great moonsault though. Okada with a big deuce on the snap zoom, one to Bailey's face. Bailey's making the comeback. Okada gets the knees up on the shooting star attempt. More great back and forth here. The Rainmaker is countered into the kick. Bailey with a big old spinning kick. A very, very, very close rope break to stop the 3 count. That was like microscopic detail. Even more back and forth, more close calls. The Ultimate Weapon is intercepted with a drop kick. The Rainmaker, and the win for Okada. I give it 4 stars out of 5. This is a very fun clash of styles here. It was physical, it was competitive. I really enjoyed a lot of the close calls and the counters as well. Speedball Mike Bailey has done a great job with in his short amount of time in AEW already, and Okada looking really strong as usual. And I'm really curious to see just, when's that belt gonna move? When's that gonna change hands? Like, are we gonna wait until the next Continental Classic, in the end of the year? That'd be cool to see, what matches Okada can build under his belt by that point, and who might be the one to take the belt off him. But definitely it was a really entertaining matchup. Sexy friends become sexy rivals as once again, timeless Toni Storm defends the AEW Women's title against Mina Shirakawa. Mina coming out once again to her original theme. She debuted a new theme a week or two ago on Dynamite, but apparently it was so poorly received online, they went ahead and changed it back to the original song in the same segment. That is some excellent customer service there. Also, kind of a fun note, seeing Luther wearing cowboy boots. They point that out early in the matchup here. Some holds and counter holds to start things off. Toni's leg becomes a factor. She's selling it a lot here. Multiple dragon screws to Toni. We get this really fun sequence involving Luther on the outside where he gets in Mina's way. He gets taken to Dick Kick City. And then for the next 2 minutes or so, it just becomes this step stool / posting block for the ladies to do moves to each other. That was great stuff. Love this wraparound shot from the ramp to around most of the ring. More attacks on the leg. Toni Storm having to grab the ropes to get out of the submission. The glamorous driver by Mina. Somehow Toni kicks out. The figure four is locked in for ages. Toni is able to escape it. We get roll-ups back and forth, then the Storm Zero. Toni wins and retains, then they kiss. For me, another really solid performance here. Another great showing by Storm, who I think is I've said it before, and I'll say it again, I think is one of the most consistently good acts in AEW right now. It's always great to see her in action. And so now, based off the results of this show, we are going to get Mercedes Moné versus Toni Storm for the women's title at All In, which is certainly going to be a very big matchup, and I know people have some strong opinions about it either way already, but I think that no matter what happens and how it goes down in Texas, I believe that match could be one of the top ones of that night. It's now time to talk about Anarchy in the Arena. You have Kenny Omega, Swerve Strickland, The Ops, and Willow Nightingale taking on the Death Riders and the Young Bucks. I brought this up in the Dynasty review, how I thought it was kind of silly for the Young Bucks to align with Jon Moxley and crew, mostly because of the way the Death Riders, as we came to know them, really were introduced, and then causing the Elite, the Young Bucks, to kind of back away. And I think, I still think that the world title picture is frustrating at this moment. I think right now it's the biggest knock I have on the AEW product, is just the way that whole Death Riders angle has kind of played out. But I will say, when it comes to Anarchy in the Arena time, when it comes to making a big old multi-person clusterfuck of a match like this, I think they did a good job in setting the table, and then the match took place. First, you have Justin Roberts saying, "Aw, shit." We get Swerve coming out as Predator right out the gate. Some great visual there with Swerve in his Predator-inspired attire. Samoa Joe noticeably absent during the Ops intro. More on him later. Kenny Omega with the Captain America-inspired gear, complete with a painted trash can lid. That would have been a really sick look for him if he wore that as IWGP US Champion. The Death Riders split off and spread all around the arena, and then we get the Young Bucks intro, which becomes this big Founding Fathers speech. You hear this kind of Revolutionary War like flute and like drum line. Justin Roberts is given this like tattered, yellowed piece of paper to read the speech off of about 86 years ago, which translates to 86 years ago, talking about how the Founding Fathers created this wonderful new company. They rejected the guaranteed riches of the status quo, and how ungrateful some of these talent are to be here, and how lucky they are, and how ungrateful some of them are to be working for us. And like cutting back to like Swerve's facial reaction to this was great, and just some of the way it went on and on and on. And then you see Matt and Nick Jackson coming out dressed as George Washington, waving their flag, and Tony Schiavone summing it up with quite possibly the greatest call of the whole night.
Well, that's about the biggest bullshit intro I've ever heard.
Also, a great part about that intro, like half the pyro doesn't work. They show the stage, and you see like one flickering light on one end, but not on the other. Then Samoa Joe pops up out of nowhere and starts attacking Claudio, and then the fight begins in earnest. We get the four-way split screen. Good luck keeping track of anything here, but I thought it was cool seeing Willow and Marina Shafir fighting on the barricade. The revolutionary drumming finally stops when Kenny Omega does this and like goes to the next track, and they play "I'm So Excited" by the Pointer Sisters. At one point, the most controversial opening theme for a wrestling show of all time, the most polarizing. And so that played for a while, and again, you see the reactions from Swerve and Omega. They're like, and they start snapping along and fighting. And then Omega wants something more rockin', more 2000s alternate rock. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. And the song Bodies from Drowning Pool plays. At this point, I feel that Taz has got to be experiencing some non-flashbacks over being part of the Alliance and having that theme play for them for a while. The reaction from the audience is so just like raw and loud. They are woken up and they are here for this. It is just so absurd, and we're just getting started. The song keeps playing as the fighting keeps going. Matter of fact, they play it back 4 times in all throughout the course of this matchup here. I love this shot where like 2 pairs of guys just pass each other in the brawl. Moxley spends eons, brutalizing powerhouse Hobbs with a fork. Every time it cuts back to them, they're like, da, 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 and Moxley just stabbing the shit out of him. And then when you finally get a shot of Hobbs, like, in the ring, in the light, honestly, a really underwhelming amount of blood for the amount that Moxley was just gigging him with that fork. They're fighting on the balcony, onto some security extras. Omega follows up with the moonsault. And boy, if you thought the AEW production team missed shots before, oh man, try trying to follow like a bunch more people. It gets a lot more difficult. So there are definitely some more of those missed shots as the match goes on. Willow and Marina fight on the outside. Shibata and Yuta join them for a sec. Then they're like, it's too hot out here. Let's go back in. Shibata puts Yuta in one of those big trash carts, but it's not going along with the script. He does find some loose barbed wire just hanging around backstage and wraps it around his leg to kick Yuta. The Bucks take out Swerve on the stage. They do the double gritty, and then Claudio is like swinging Swerve around on the floor outside the stage, and he swings him into this one speaker, and by doing that causes the whole sound system to stop working, apparently. So Bodies stops playing after its fourth restart, and then the one speaker caused it. And then right after that, we get this like moment where Hobbs spears Claudio through all these like gimmicked work boxes, and they look super fake. I didn't like how that looked in particular. Marina locking Willow to the ring post. Bucks this crazy double team move on Omega through the table. Just as things are looking dire for the babyfaces, Swerve comes in to save the day while riding a forklift, Nana doing the dance on the back of it. Nana releases Willow. We get dual spine busters by Hobbs and Willow, and I know the word is spine busters, but looking at my notes, in my haste of writing it, I wrote with an OI, so it says spine busters, so they hit dual spine busters, do Hobbs and Willow, and they're big, black, and jacked. I love that moment there. Nicholas produces a staple gun. He hits Hobbs with it, and he just no-sells it. I love the way Hobbs is portrayed in this matchup. He looks like an absolute beast. The way he just, frankly, no-sells a lot of the heel's offense in this match. Meanwhile, Swerve's an artist with the way he handles the staple gun. Those counters are just incredible. Marina staples his tongue, which is pretty grody. Then everyone gets their shit in. A bloody Marina spits in Omega's face, tells him to do it, and he does. Prince Nana takes a bump during the super kick party, as does Rick Knox. Hook shows up at one point, then leaves. And then right after that, Gabe Kidd shows up to help the Death Riders. Sure would be nice if Hook were still around here. EVP triggered a Kenny with a mouthful of thumbtacks. Moxley seems to have it won, but Samoa Joe makes the save. They fight their way to the ambulance, which is still there from the stretcher match. Then Mark Briscoe saves the day. Looking insane, still covered in blood. Everyone just fights their way into the ambulance at this point. Looks a bit absurd to see like all these people from the Death Riders just kind of walk themselves in to the ambulance as they're fighting. And eventually they get locked in, and the Young Bucks are all by themselves. Nana produces a pair of Swerve's new shoes with thumbtacks on them. Omega with the one-winged angel on Matthew off the stage through an exploding table. Swerve hits his stomp on Nicholas. The babyfaces win, and look at that staple in Swerve's tongue. You know, a match as bonkersville and absurd as this, it can't possibly be rated in a typical 5-star format, which is why I'm going to be giving Anarchy in the Arena 18 Mike the Maleficent Love Machine heads. As far as how that converts to stars, nobody knows. But either way, this was a very, very silly match from start to finish, and I was thoroughly sports entertained throughout the whole thing. This was absolute zaniness, and it was mad, and it was hysterical. From the Young Bucks coming out like George Washington, to the music cues, to everyone getting turns to shine and whatnot. Some of the creative ways the baby faces had to escape their situations. It was just very, very fun. And I can tolerate a lot of bullshit in my wrestling. I think the one thing that got me going was the very end where, the Death Riders all kind of walked themselves into the ambulance, and then 5 people getting trapped in there while they're being barely held back by a few people for a very long amount of time. That didn't sit well with me. I mean, I didn't have a problem with Swerve standing still to get stapled, compared to the way that match ended, but it's all forgiven because it's all bullshit and it's all fun. And it's just I think Anarchy in the Arena is one of the better traditions that AEW has right now. I think it's just the opportunity to get wacky and just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. and just creating some really awesome moments, like everyone kind of not expecting bodies to play, and the way they responded to that was so fun. And just, yeah, the timing of some of their bits they did. This is just, yeah, a very fun escape from the other stuff you're going to see like on this show, or anything else you're going to see in most wrestling for that matter. But boy, I feel bad for the come down match. It's trios action as the Don Callis family, that is Kyle Fletcher, Josh Alexander, and Konosuke Takeshita, take on the Paragon, that is Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, and Kyle O'Reilly. They're not the Undisputed Kingdom anymore. I think that the Don Callis family needs to work on color coordination a bit better. Like, I'm all for embracing individuality, but come on, there's got to be some kind of effort there. Roderick Strong is the heat magnet for this matchup. I love that diving crossbody Josh Alexander does to him to the outside. Don Callis at commentary, he's able to get a shot in. Callis is going on about dominating AEW through like championships and everything. And then like he and Taz have this kind of funny exchange about like the definition of power in wrestling.
Taz, I remember when you had a lot of power in this business when you were a wrestler. How much power would I have if I had every title in this company and I grew the family to say 20 members?
That would be amazing. You mean I had a lot of power? I wasn't a political guy. What the hell is that about?
No, but everyone was afraid of you.
Oh, that's different than power.
Don leaves his post, and now Lance Archer joins on commentary. Cole taking a damn top rope powerbomb from Takeshita, which is pretty bold for a guy who had big concussion issues. Also, considering like for the last like month since he's won the TNT title, like he's wrestled so sparingly, if at all, like just promos, just commentary and stuff, and people are going like, what's the deal with Adam Cole? Like, well, he takes a bump like that, he must be somewhat good to work. Things get zany on the outside. Kyle flies into the shot. Alexander is dropped onto the barricade, just teeters for a while. A great fast exchange between Fletcher and Kyle O'Reilly. In comes Takeshita with the save, the deadlift brainbuster, and the win for the family. Then after the bell, Roppongi Vice come in to add to the beating from the family. But then Brody King, Tomohiro Ishii, and Hiroshi Tanahashi, and his legs going in 3 different directions, make their way to the ring. He hits the sling blade on Fletcher, which makes me cringe. How does he run with his legs looking like that? Cole with the boom to Fletcher. Paragon and friends stand tall. I give it 3 stars out of 5. It's a tough spot for this match to be in, or any match after what we saw at Anarchy in the Arena, because that was so insane and off the wall that anything after that is going to look really boring and lukewarm in comparison. And so this was a well-executed match. It just lacked a little bit of soul for me personally, and it was just, I wasn't really jazzed up for it. So to me, it was just kind of there, but that is what its spot was, unfortunately. Main event time, it's the Owen Hart men's tournament final as Hangman Page takes on Will Ospreay. And man, the build for this match has been so good as of late, and I loved the little pre-intro hype package that Hangman got before his music played, where he says he can't change what he's done, but to be the man he needs to be, he has to become the champion again. You see the image of him holding the championship in his eyes as he says, I need this. Ooh, I got chills watching that. Meanwhile, Ospreay's preamble features some sound bites from his promo last week, some stained glass imagery, then we get the normal intro. Well, that certainly felt more necessary and impactful than like whatever the dubstep intro he had a month or so ago with Kyle Fletcher. Starts out with a somewhat slower pace, Hangman with a big old shot that knocks Ospreay on his ass. We get a fallaway slam into the barricade later on. We're getting the yay boos from the crowd. Ospreay with the Sasuke special onto Page. Hangman takes this backdrop to the outside, clear over the apron, but he comes back with a clothesline, the big Orihana moonsault. More great back and forth. Hangman with a buckshot out of the corner, goes for another one but is kicked. Ospreay with a nice draping shooting star from there. Tombstone and the Angel's Wings by Hangman, but a kick out at each of them. They're fighting on the apron. Ospreay with this powerbomb attempt into the Styles Clash on the floor. That looked nuts. Hangman barely avoids the 10 count, walks right into an Oz Cutter. Still not the end, and he kicks out of the Hidden Blade. Ospreay's getting chippy. He's like hitting Page with the heel of his hand, getting really kind of rude. The fans are getting restless when they see that. They make their way to the announce table, and it looks like they're about to do the Deadeye, but it's very reminiscent of like Triple H and Kurt Angle at SummerSlam 2000. The announce table gives way underneath. When they're about to like jump up for the move, the table collapses, and they just like fall down on top of each other, and that was pretty scary. But they do recover, and Hangman does the Deadeye as originally intended. We get this face-off. They each take off elbow pads. It's Blade versus Buckshot. Buckshot wins, but the match is not over yet. Another Buckshot is countered by a hidden Blade, the Stormbreaker in a kick-out. Then each man borrows a little something from their rivals, like Ospreay hits the V-trigger, and Hangman hits the peer pressure, and they point that out on commentary. I thought that was a cool little wrinkle. Counters and counters aplenty. Hangman hits one lariat, another Buckshot. Hangman wins. He wins the tournament. He's going to All In to face Jon Moxley for the title, and we get some sportsmanship. I'm going to give it 5 stars out of 5. This is an absolutely brilliant matchup here. I think that just in terms of straight up wrestling action, if we're not going to include Anarchy in the Arena, it is my favorite match of the night. I think that it was a great chapter in the arc of Hangman Page. I think, I bit so much, so often in this matchup on near falls and whatnot, where I truly thought it was over. And they kept finding ways to surprise me and keep the drama up. I thought that was just a really well done main event. It was one where you could feel good about either man winning, and you wonder what will the future hold for either man. What's Ospreay's story going to be for All In, as Hangman, comes in as the cowboy, doing the cowboy shit, challenging Moxley for the championship. It definitely feels like maybe this is going to be the point where the tide turns, and maybe this will be Hangman's redemption. There's a lot to kind of look forward to and speculate about in the build to All In, but I think this was just a really, really, really good match. One of my favorites from both guys, and both guys have been putting out excellent work in the last couple of years. And so I think this matchup here is just another great addition and a fine way to end the show. That said, my grade for AEW Double or Nothing is an A. I really enjoyed this show from start to finish. Yes, it was long. Yes, there were a couple of matches where I felt, that didn't need to be on the card. Like it didn't really have the same kind of, I didn't have the same kind of juice, toward it as I do for other matches, but I think they're still fine once you get into them. I think that obviously Anarchy in the Arena is an all-timer for me. I think that the Owen Hart tournament matches made the show start and end really strong. Stretcher match was a lot of fun. Okada and Bayley, a lot of fun. With Dynasty last month, I didn't care for that show. I had a few things that I disagreed with on it, in particular, the main event scene. But I feel after what we saw on Sunday, they do seem to be taking some steps in the right direction toward correcting that. And I do feel that AEW is really hitting their stride again, and they're developing a lot of very interesting matchups and scenarios for All In. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Double or Nothing. I think it was a really strong show for the year. And if you disagree, you can go on Reddit and complain and think I'm trying to get signed by AEW, whatever. But what did you think of Double or Nothing? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding as I was dealing with my voice issues. I'm glad it held out long enough for me to give you this review. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.